Strange Hill High. Does anyone in the audience remember this show? Probably not, because it was on the channel BBC but with a C in front of it, which means that you basically have to be in the UK to see it. Also, the show only got 2 seasons, which is a cruel joke when another show called Jamie Johnson, which is one of the worst pieces of tripe of children's media I have ever seen, got 6 seasons, and they have confirmed for a 7th to be released, when it's just about a kid playing sodding football. But what is Strange Hill High about? Well, it's about a school which has a bunch of strange shit going on, and you know the people of the school, well, they react to it. Your 3 main characters are Mitchell, the resident cool guy of the group, Becky, who had half of her voice lines replaced with screaming that will drive you insane, and Templeton, who is a
weird boy.
And I'll introduce you to the other characters as we go along. The first thing you'll notice about this show is that the opening theme goddamn slaps. It was so catchy that even after about 6 years, I could still remember every single lyric in this.
What might be lurking around the corner and what it might do if it ever found or saw you. Keep the lights on in the hallways all day.
In the first episode, Templeton has to clean some toilets because he was running in the halls, presumably caught by the head teacher in Baldy's Basics.
No running in the halls.
But Templeton isn't too mad though, because he thought it was in a reality TV show. And also, we meet Tyson, who has massive fucking hands. Like, his hands are almost as wide as Becky is tall. As Tyson tries to steal Becky's project, Mitchell hits him with it, and a chase ensues. Also, it's here we meet one of the biggest feats in voice acting. This grunt. This grunt is performed so similarly each time, it's honestly somewhat uncanny, but I love it. And then Tyson fucking dies. But hey, it's okay, because they see a crack in the wall, open it, and cause even more property damage, where they find a door which contains a toilet night. Well, it is called Strange Hill High, so I'm not too sure what you're expecting. So Mitchell then does what Mitchell does best, and decides to lie to this guy and make him think that he's the current king of Britain, because fuck it, he's got nothing else going on. And him and his massive zip decides to enslave his friends and make the knight irons his socks. But thankfully, the writer of this show isn't the writer of iCarly, so we didn't get any shots of Mitchell's feet. Also, I'm going to do a little bit of a CinemaSins tier criticism here. The knight said that he's been there for at least 500 years, as he mentions later with the troll, and Britain didn't actually exist 500 years ago, but I'm not going to be petty and dock the show for that, because, come on. But, with all good things, this slavery got ruined by a woman, as she tells the knight that Mitchell isn't actually the king, so he takes the only logical step and kidnaps Becky, and then Mitchell goes back to the toilets to get his knight. And then they meet, where Mitchell reveals the biggest plot twist of the century. Becky is a femboy.
Right, well, she's not strictly speaking my lady, or a lady.
Mitchell?
Although Mitchell is frankly too beta male to fight the knight head on, so they just sort of play rock, paper, scissors for a little bit. And Becky, she yells at Mitchell and basically spoils his entire plan, but somehow the knight actually falls for it, despite being told about it. That's like having a royal flush in poker. You can see that your opponent only has a pair through the mirror in the room, but you decide to fold anyway. Also, the hentai monster broke through the wall, and instead of fighting the damn thing, they decide to break out the rock, paper, scissors again, because they are simply too cuck beta male to actually focus on the damn monster and instead focus on the maiden. But Mitchell grabs the stuck-on Excalibur bottle, which allows him to defeat the monster, secure Becky, and make the knight stop being pissed at him. So all is right in the world. And here we are on episode 2. First off, the kids are going to be late, so Mitchell decides to climb the clock tower, but also, the music in this episode fucking slaps. Like, I'm just going to play both the motif of this episode, and also the music that plays when Mitchell is climbing the building. After he climbs up the building and they move the clock hand back, they realise that they moved time back. Now, are the rules of time travel in this episode very inconsistent? Yes. Did it confuse me loads as a kid? And I had to think about it for ages? Yes. But hey, it's a good show, so I don't mind at the moment, to be honest. Going inside, we get to see Bishop and Montgomery, who looks about 60 years too old to go to the school, having a very intellectual discussion about the American Civil Rights Movement.
Check out my fresh new medallion.
Do you even know who Malcolm X was?
Course I do. It was one of the X-Men, innit?
But then...
All of our exams, every single one, on one day!
So, Abercrombie locks the exam answers in a safe which has an alarm on it. But then... So then he places them on litter duty to get mauled by a bunch of squirrels. But of course that sucks. So they go inside the clock tower to try and do a little bit of time trolling. Then Templeton has the genius idea to hit the fabric of time with a hammer. But thankfully, this somehow doesn't destroy reality as we know it, because it leads them to finding a key, which they can use to turn the clock. And so after stopping themselves from going on litter duty, what do they do with the time machine? The most fucking boring thing I can imagine, and they just ate cakes for a while.
But we need to go to Mr. Balding's history study class to study history for Mr. Balding's history exam for Mr. Balding's history class. Oh, sorry, got stuck on a chocolate log loop.
And it was on that day something awoke within Mitchell, that he would have to go to the deep dark corners of DeviantArt to satisfy. After they've spent a while messing around with the time machine some more, they decide to do something actually productive with it, and go to midnight after the exams finish so that the safe will be unlocked. But then, Abercrombie catches them.
Why do they have blast doors at a school?
There's a joke about American high schools in there somewhere, isn't there? So they run up to the clock tower, and they try using the key, but that doesn't work. So do they decide to take the punishment nobly and not damage the fabric of time? Of bloody course not! They decide to jam a drill into the fabric of time itself. Now, unsurprisingly, this backfires, as when they get back, they have to do the exam immediately, and Becky starts getting dementia, and Templeton turns into a baby. They go outside, and who do they see? Themselves. And then Mitchell climbs up to go and stop himself from touching the clock for the first time. They touch, the clock then explodes, thus showing the fabric of time getting destroyed. But then the clock just kind of fixes itself. As a kid, I always thought this meant that the timeline the episode was in got destroyed, and the show from after this is a new one. But I don't know if they thought that deeply into it, so whatever. This episode starts off with this man who has the weirdest head shape I have ever seen. Like, did they forget to paint the beard on or something like that? And he asks Mitchell to try and find his son. Mitchell is late to go to class, and so went to the head teacher's room, where the desk goes missing. And then they go to Mr. Balding's room, where he gives the class one of the best lessons of all time.
The fascinating thing about New Zealand is it's like Australia, but without any history or any fun. I'll show you.
Truly an intellectual. But, oh no, he's lost his globe! How is he going to educate us now? So, after this, a bunch more stuff goes missing, and who would get blamed but Mitchell? So he gets accused, and he demands a locker search to prove his innocence.
Boy guarding his privates with a textbook.
But then this stuff actually is in his locker. So Templeton and Becky go and disguise themselves as a grandma to try and extract some information in one of the greatest scenes in all television.
Hello, young lady. My grandson, Borgmanberg, seems to have lost something valuable that is gold and has value.
Beyond the most most valuable treasures in the whole wide world.
Yes, it was worth 40 quid. Have you any idea what may have happened to it?
No.
Oh, okay, thank you, dearie.
And they go into the Lost and Found, where they find the best thing ever. Femboy Templeton. And then we see something moving around in the camera, and he just starts throwing things at them for some reason. And it's none other than Leafy is here. Oh, sorry, it's Peter. And Templeton then has to go through the most awkward experience that us femboys have to go through all the damn time.
I'm a guy.
Dear God, I love this show so much. Peter then takes them to his house using the fabulous Poodle Boy, and he tries to teach them to fly, and it kind of works. Honestly, I'd best describe Peter as a demented Peter Pan. Wait, that's why he's called Peter Dustpan, isn't it? God, I'm such a genius. And then, when they try to leave, he brings out a bloody cricket bat. So instead, Mitchell decides to, do a little bit of fraud and trick him into finding all the stolen stuff using a treasure hunt. And then they go through Mitchell's locker, which explains why the stuff was in his locker, and they find Peter's dad, who's the weird-shaped guy outside. Brilliant plot. So, yay! Episode 3, done. Let's go to episode 4. In Strange Hill High episode 4, there's a musical going on, and Becky wants to audition. Slight issue though, she's...
I'm singing in the shower with my mighty big lung power. Been doing it.
So they go to music class. Honestly though, the best thing about this show is how it weirdly realistically depicts the student-teacher relations. Like there's always that one kid who sucks up to the teachers because, I don't know, he likes MILFs, I guess. In this case, Montgomery is the one who steps up to the O'Shea. And they have this weirdly good singing session, and Becky goes to sleep. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, it's a dream episode! And they try to find out if they're in a dream. So what is the logical thing? Maybe looking at their headmaster who was turned into an ice cream. Or do that spinning top thing from Inception. But instead, they decide to cause an atomic explosion. Thankfully though, it was a dream. We then meet the Grackle, or as she's known in Mexico,
El Bestia Melodioso.
And she's a representation of Becky Butter's fears and anxieties about the audition. So Becky decides to hide in a room. But then, the Mellow Trick Toad, baby. Now, the Mellow Trick Toad is in fact an absolute con man, because he led the kids straight to the Grackle.
Get y'all on the flip side!
Serves you right, you greedy bugger. Oh, and also, the Grackle then picks up Becky, Mitchell then tells her she isn't real, then Grackle puts her down, then the Grackle picks her back up again, which somehow scares Becky, because she didn't think that a representation of his could do this? Like, bitch, she already picked you up. Why is this a surprise? And it's a dream anyway! Morning, Becky. But this time, the Grackle shows up in real life. Free idea for you there, J-Station. So they decide to bolt off to the audition room, where they hide behind the piano. Although, from the angle the Grackle was standing, there is absolutely no goddamn way that the Grackle does not see her. But anyway, Becky goes up there to sing her heart out, to beat the Grackle once and for all, and prove that she is the best singer in the whole school, and oh dear God. Well, at least Mitchell can get his rocks off again. And this post-nut clarity gives him the idea to turn the sprinklers on. And then Becky sings amazingly. And in celebration, Mitchell and Templeton rip out the Grackle's fingernails? Yeah, watching this show back now I'm older feels so weird. Honestly though, the show does still hold up. Anyway, they open the trapdoor in the stage, and I guess she just starves to death under the stage. Very child-friendly, guys. Moving on to episode 5, which is an incredibly British episode. Why? Well, because it's about the one thing that Britain is famous for, tooth decay. But Becky tries to stop this because her sister was apparently turned into a short-sighted freak. Her words, not mine, which I think is alluding to Becky's sister having diabetes? I'm not too sure, but it does seem like that. Oh, and it's established that Templeton is one of those kids who goes crazy when he has any sort of sugar. Also known as the kid who, whenever you saw him, your fist would almost instinctually ball up into a fist and deck him in the forehead. But regardless, Becky's healthy snacks weren't exactly selling like hotcakes, and she needs to come up with rent. So what does Mitchell do to help her in this case? Does he A, advise her to actively go up to the students and market the product, rather than simply standing behind a stall? Or does he B, acknowledge the low odds of success and simply cut their losses, no doubt saddening Becky, but helping her in the long term, and their relationship improving as a result? Well, he chose option C, and decided to spray paint the vegetables to make them look neon. And Becky decides to fucking agree with this, because apparently lead poisoning is better than losing a tooth. And meanwhile, I chose option D, which is to lament over my own lack of creativity because I made the same tired joke as nearly every other YouTuber. But the chef, on seeing their success, releases some rabbits on the vegetables so they get eaten. So, to try and stop this, the gang then go looking for a spare key in the kitchen. I'm not all too sure why though, because the chef has already unleashed the bunnies on the vegetables, so they're probably all eaten at the moment. So I have no clue what they could possibly gain from going back in. But oh well. And what do they find? Lots and lots of teeth. And then who else would come in but the chef, wielding an electric whisk. And Becky does the worst attempt at hiding I've ever seen. Like, the chef saw her go in, so why not just run around? But anyway, Mitchell gets cornered somehow, even though the kitchen is laid out in a circle. So Becky decides to kill the chef with a plate. But then, the Tooth Fairy is here, and she's going to take our teeth, so watch out everyone at home. But once they get to Abercrombie's office to tell him of all of this, a slight hole appears in their story as the cook shows up. Granted, his head's gone a bit weird now, but still. Also, I just want to take the time to say that the character designs in this show are absolutely phenomenal. Like, making the chef have a chef hat head is absolutely genius. And here, you'll get to hear one of Becky's best lines. Truly mind-blowing. Now, what does Becky do? Well, she of course decides to become a drug dealer and give all the students in the school lead poisoning. And the Tooth Fairy is apparently the bad guy in this show. Now that they
Got him on the ropes.
They decide to trap the Tooth Fairy by baiting him with Templeton's great uncle as the bait. But this doesn't work well, as they forgot that the fairy could just teleport, so oops, I guess. And we find out that the cook wasn't always a robot made by the Tooth Fairy, as he had been kidnapped by the Tooth Fairy. And it's also established here that the Tooth Fairy is trying to build a smilophone. And who has the necessary tooth? None other than Becky Butters. Abercrombie decides to go and actually change his mind, because he's come to the conclusion that eating lead is better than eating sugar. So he's basically those people who are perfectly alright with 20-kilogram models on the runway, but if someone who's slightly overweight goes on, well, it's time to stop the presses! But wait, turns out the children won't be eating spray paint today, because Abercrombie is actually in 2 places at once. So it must be the Tooth Fairy at work. So Mitchell goes to investigate. Mitchell and Templeton eventually find the tunnel that takes them straight to the Tooth Fairy, where we find that Becky's tooth has been taken due to Becky's own sweet tooth. And we find out that she never had a sister. Oh, and the Tooth Fairy slots in the final tooth, and then he plays a beautiful song.
I'm a very happy little fairy, fluttering about in the sun. I keep some special lotion in the cupboard, 'cause I sometimes get a very itchy bum.
Man, that's lame.
Shut up.
Yeah, so the Tooth Fairy is kinda dead now, and Templeton manages to defy gravity simply by eating a candy cane. and we get to witness some of the best special effects I've ever seen. Also, this show suffers from what I would like to consider acute stock sound effect syndrome. It affects roughly 1 in 3 shows, and although it isn't life-threatening, it can cause a decrease in immersion and usually worsens over time. I'll show one example of this in this episode, and then the most egregious example of this after. So, the egregious example is actually in Season 2, not Season 1. In this episode, Mitchell Jr., where a baby knocks over 3 tables, and it plays the exact same sound effect 3 times in a row, just at different volumes.
Daddy, I haven't got any. We ate it all. Oh, he's so cute.
Truly a tragedy. Anyway, Mitchell leads the giant mouth to a version of him which is made out of toffee, and then the mouth eats that, gets all gummed up, and explodes. Now some people might ask how the chef managed to cook toffee and turn that toffee into a mould of Mitchell in about 15 seconds. To that I'd say, episode 6 starts off with a very grandiose shot of a boy reading about the corn laws. But before he could learn about their effects on the prices of barley, he is sucked into the book. Oh, and also we get another amazing history lesson by Mr. Boulding.
1883 was another interesting year. It consisted of 365 days. Of those, 52 were Mondays, 52 were Tuesdays, but only 3 were Wednesdays. After a ship carrying the nation's W's was sunk by an inconsiderate giant squid.
Also, Mr. Boulding has set a school project and... You know what? That joke is so easy to make, I'm not going to make it, because you've heard similar ones to it thousands of times. You're very welcome. Mitchell says he's going to go to the library to try and finish his project. Now, naturally, this being a high school, everyone recoils in horror at the mere suggestion of reading, and they say that there's a book that's so boring, it'll make people vanish. I won't insult your intelligence by saying, ooh, this may or may not come into play later in the episode. Now, why would they decide to read the one book which has been mysteriously left open and the booklight has been left on, indicating that someone may have mysteriously vanished by reading this book? But oh no, they vanished! Serves them right, to be quite honest. They should have picked a book on natural selection. The librarian then tries to convince Mitchell that he came in alone, without his friends. But he sees their backpacks, so he knows something's weird. And also, Templeton makes a reference to a god-awful show known as 13 Reasons Why.
Ones I cannot say.
That's crazy. Why would aliens have an old broom?
Probing.
If you don't get what I mean by that, then do not look it up. Now, because of the fact that they were reading the book, on the page that spoke of the electrical storm, they realise that the storm may happen, and they need to warn everyone. But they instead get locked into the school office. Also, Mitchell, being the great bloody help he is, makes party hats, and says bum randomly.
Bum.
Truly, a useful companion. Now, this is probably one of the most suspiciously convenient for the writers moments in all of the suspiciously convenient for the writer moments in this whole show, because not only does Templeton just so happen to open the book on the right page, not only do Becky and Templeton know that Mitchell is reading it at that very second, but they also know that he's about to be sucked in, and so they write, "Wake up!" So I mean, I think that's one more added to the CinemaSin counter. Anyway, they tell Mitchell to go and get Mr. Boulding, who then convinces Mr. Boulding to make the book more exciting. But before he can, the librarian keeps them from getting the book. As Mr. Boulding makes the book more exciting, the storm starts happening. But it's inside a building, not outside. And Mitchell does the honourable thing and gets into a fight with a senior citizen, and somehow doesn't immediately crush her into a puddle of Parkinson's. But the so-called electric storm actually brings Becky, Templeton and Matthew back into the present, and all is resolved. This episode starts out with Mitchell saying he really wants to see an MC Bonebag concert, but unfortunately it's sold out. So Mitchell, in an effort to get into the MC Bonebag concert, he tries to join the school newspaper, but before he can graduate and be allowed to go, he has to find stories for the paper. But, of course, not all too much happens in school, so he just decides to make up a few stories, like hopping plague spreading through the school, or the school collapsing, and also Templeton becomes a photographer. But as she goes to put the news in the paper, the printer runs out of ink, so he uses some special ink. I'm absolutely sure this will have no negative repercussions at all. In the morning, they find out that everything in the newspaper that was written turned into a reality when people read it. Be this a scathing commentary on the state of modern media, or simply a surface-level children's show, it is veering very close to the side of copying the last episode, with books influencing reality and all. Upon realising this, they all try to take the papers back, but Abercrombie still has one of the papers, so Mitchell has to run in and take it. Also, if you're wondering why Abercrombie has a pig on his head, well, it's because he's doing a Fousey Tube cosplay.
Yeah, it's a good point, that. My friends are idiots. I'm gonna fucking notice.
Fousey, you've got a pig on your head.
No, I don't.
No, you've literally got a pig on your head. You are literally saying this with a pig on your head.
Mitchell follows Murdoch to go and burn the papers in the furnace room, only to have Murdoch try and burn Mitchell alive, even before he heard what Mitchell did. But just as they were about to burn the papers, Fousey Tube comes in and takes the papers away. They then grow some beards and go upstairs to print some new stories, but unfortunately, Mitchell messes up again and the printer stops running. I mean, it wouldn't have mattered anyway because it gets crushed by some rubble, but then Murdoch fixes it, so yay! Slight issue here though. If reading the paper makes the information in it come true, then why don't they just write the new paper with just a pen using the special ink without the printing press? As surely only one of them would need to read it. Oh, what's that? Sorry everyone, I'm being told to shut up and stop overanalyzing children's shows. So, Mitchell locks the newspaper girl in a supply room because he's simply too anxious to talk to women because femboys are more his type, I guess. Then they turn the printer on, but it runs out of ink now. They could share it around or just have one of them read it, as mentioned before, because, you know, if one person reads it, it becomes true. But instead, they decide to run a TV broadcast so that all the class can see it. But I do have a few questions about this. 1. How in the world do they all fit inside the TV screen? 2. How in the hell does this actually work without the magic ink? But, oh whatever. At least Mitchell gets his free concert because he mentions it in the TV broadcast. Well, turns out Abercrombie blocks Mitchell from going to it due to his massive dumpy. So that kind of sucked. Hello everyone. Happy Public Safety Week. But here in Strange Hill High, this is the least safe week in the history of weeks, as quite literally everything that could go wrong does go wrong. Be it getting hit in the face with a locker, getting hit by a security camera, or falling on a puddle of water. They then get taken to room 101. The film room, where they have to watch a health and safety film. Seems normal enough so far, right? You know the drill of these things, where the worst possible scenario literally always happens and they give you acronyms which are almost impossible to remember. But, unfortunately, Mitchell just can't resist breaking things again. So things get weird. No, this isn't an exporting issue. The episode really starts to look like this, complete with a narrator who's far too cheerful, almost makes you think that we're inside the safety film. So after committing a gun bit of manslaughter, Mitchell and co run off to try and get out of the film. After going for a light jog, they reach the hallway, where the slightest misstep could be fatal, and they see Screamy Boy. Although this boy appeared fine, a few seconds later, the boy died. Also, instead of simply stepping around this sparking electrical wire, they instead decide to keep on stepping through it. Jesus Christ, I really do see why they needed this week now. But then, Winston Churchill breaks through the ceiling, Bishop dies, and they go up to the clock tower for some reason. But after trying to yell to anyone outside, nobody actually helps them. But the film ends, and the Beware Bear shows up, so they try to climb out. Mitchell somehow falls out upwards, and the clock hand falls off, burrows through the Earth's fucking crust, and hits the boiler in the basement. Jesus Christ. How bloody soft is the planet in this universe? Anyway, this somehow makes the school shoot upwards and then come back down, upside down. And then Templeton says this.
Topsy-turvy. That means Christmas in July. Oh, but it also means now I'm a girl. I hate paradoxes.
God, I wish my house would explode and then come back upside down. Now, they then decide to go backwards. Now, how exactly this works with regards to gravity and stuff, or how they manage to ride the skateboard backwards with the opposite momentum, I'm not too sure. But honestly, not all too much happens, besides them just walking backwards to reverse the tape. They get back to the recorder and decide to break it, and for the second time in the show, this should have destroyed them and their entire reality. But instead, it just brings them back to normal, instead of, by destroying the film, they'd be destroying themselves. But whatever! Oh, and also Abercrombie gets electrocuted. Now, Strange Hill High once again uses a school project for a plot device, as Mitchell has once again not done his business project, and has also forgotten to do pretty much every single piece of homework in existence. So Becky yells at him to finish his project. He tries that, but, well, gets bored, and to be fair, there was no way he was going to finish the project on time anyway, so I can kind of respect that. Oh no! He's been cornered by the two teachers, fear coursed through his veins. He bolts behind the trophy cabinet, only to find a secret room. Surely the strangest thing about Strange Hill High is how it could simultaneously be ridiculously poor and yet have a spare room. Like, in my school, that shit would have been used to host a private drama club or something. Mitchell saw a ghost, but he forgot his homework book, so they go back into the room with the ghost in it, and to help them, Templeton has a UV light, where they see some very suspicious stains on the floor, and considering this is a school, that's very bloody dark. But when they find Mitchell's homework, they find that it has been completed. But by who? Well, by who else other than by the three ghosts who have been stuck in the classroom until a teacher dismisses them. But as the teacher died, they have to stay here forever and finish any work passed to them. So naturally, what does Mitchell do? Well, he decides to set up a sweatshop that does homework, of course! Not only that, he decides to make a bet with Abercrombie that his business can make the most money, and that if he succeeds, then Abercrombie can no longer punish him. But if he fails, then Abercrombie can give him the worst punishment possible. So he gets cracking right away and starts accepting homework from every other student for the ghost to do. Truly, a great person. Also, Mitchell then starts trying to motivate his slaves like he owns a damn pyramid scheme, because he kind of does. But after they leave, Abercrombie tries to sneak into their secret room after spying on them in order to find out their chocolate-making secrets, because he thinks they're making chocolate, as you do. And so he finds the ghost, but he actually acts surprisingly composed considering the circumstances, and instead just dismisses them. This was a bloody bad idea, because you might have realised something. If these kids are in detention, then chances are they're the naughty type. So rather than passing on to the afterlife, they instead just barge out of the class and start stirring up a ruckus. And so Mitchell and co. decided to dress as their old headmaster. But they mess up and Zoidberg out of there. But it's all fine, because Abercrombie just decides to give them a detention anyway. And he decides to do the most honourable thing in the whole show, and hijack Becky's non-profit using the slave trade. Truly a wholesome ending. Winter has come to Strange Hill High, but the kids don't get to enjoy it for long, as following Templeton's unfortunate experiences with a chainsaw and Abercrombie's near death at the hands of Templeton, they face the, in comparison to what they did, least strict punishment ever, Also, all they have to do is clean up the science lab. But Becky decides not to do that and just look at the pets. That said though, Mitchell and Templeton also do fuck all, as they find this machine which can turn spheres into cubes, make smaller copies of objects, and can swap the colours on things. Oh, and it can also make everything bigger. So, naturally, Mitchell decides to blindly shoot these rays out anywhere and everywhere, causing untold damage, probably breaking the librarian's bones, and giving Abercrombie lead poisoning. But, oh no, Abercrombie's coming back to the science lab, and they haven't cleaned the room! But then, they just teleport all the stuff into Abercrombie's office, so no harm done. And then Becky decides to set all of the animals free in a room with a device that can change the very fabric of matter itself. So, of course, the animals make themselves absolutely fucking massive. And so, the guinea pig attacks Murdoch, eats Stephanie's phone, and manages to get into the air ducts, which is really impressive considering how bloody massive the thing is. So, Mitchell goes into the air vents like the sussy imposter oh dear god he is to try and track the thing down. But then, the giant guinea pig is downstairs, which raises a bit of an issue. If the guinea pig is down here, then what the hell is in the vents? A giant rabbit! He was the imposter all along! And as he tries to go back down the vent, he sees a massive turtle flanking him. So he bangs through the grate, landing on Abercrombie's lap. Oh, also, it is worth noting that the turtle in this scene is small enough to fit in the school vents, but here he is fucking massive. So if someone could please explain this to me a little bit, I'd be very appreciative. But then they come up with a plan. They tried to shrink the animals back in by luring them into the lab, but instead they accidentally combined the toad with Abercrombie, thus making Toad-a-Crombie. So Mitchell tries to turn him back to his original self, but oh no, Toad-a-Crombie notices. Thankfully though, he was so shocked, he got tongue-tied. Also, they then find Aver-Toady, but they don't get to savor this victory for long, as Toad-a-Crombie starts chasing them until they get chased outside. They're about to be killed. But in the most deus ex of machinas, Templeton whips out his chainsaw again and makes a cat sculpture out of snow, scaring away the rodents. But this was only a temporary fix, as they now have to act if they want to save the school. So they go back inside and, after Templeton's failed assault with a chainsaw, Mitchell turns the power up to full blast, which makes a tiny copy of the school. And then the kids could go back to the normal large school. Now some people may say this ending makes no sense. And how is Abercrombie out here when he should be inside the tiny school? Well, to that the show says,
don't question it.
Alright. Jesus fucking Christ. We are on over 5,400 words at this point in the script, which is by far the longest script I've ever written, for what was supposed to be just a small little break video, so that I can get back to making the Skylanders video. For God's sake. So I'll try to make the next few episodes a bit more concise, and if you want more detail on what's going on in the episode, just watch the episodes. They're brilliant, and they're on YouTube under a channel named Forgotten Gold. So, to start off the episode, we find that Becky was standing under a tree, and then it fell on top of her. And then these bloody idiots decided to wear the same clothes. How embarrassing. Someone's gonna have to change. But as it turns out, they were actually wearing cheerleading uniforms. Becky then tries out for cheerleading, but she sneezes and cocks up. And I mean, it is genuinely impressive that a girl in a wheelchair managed to get on, but Becky couldn't. Anyway, she later becomes the head cheer cleaner, so good for her, I guess. Also, Templeton decides to try out for basketball, but he fails. He then tries out for the chess club, and fails. But then Becky sees a rabbit costume in the corner. She puts it on to try and cheer on Bishop for the chess team, and she starts her routine. She trips and falls onto the board, but as she falls onto the board, the chess pieces fall back on perfectly so that Bishop scores a checkmate. How lucky.
Mitchell, guess what?
I finally gone nuts and I'm hallucinating a giant mangy bunny?
No, it's me, Bex!
Yeah, that doesn't explain the manky rabbit costume.
Well, Mitchell, I've recently made a DeviantArt account and I found out about this great thing called fursonas. and I started getting into it, and then I bought a fursuit for only 10 grand, and oh, it's amazing! Mitchell then gets Tyson knocked out using a tree. It also cures leprosy and helps the same leprosy sufferer to find a chocolate bar. And then the class aces a music exam. All due to Becky's luck. Oh, also, the knight from the first episode shows up to kidnap Tyson. And Becky has the same problem that many a furry has, in that she can't take off her damn fursuit and is stuck in it. And she wants to take it off because she realised that whenever there's good luck, there's also bad luck in equal measure. Also, the good and bad luck is now spreading very quickly, on its own even. And now Mitchell and Becky are going to have their faces broadcasted onto the moon, where Becky has to wish the world good luck because of the contract Mitchell signed with the entertainment company. So, to save the world, she wishes herself bad luck, which destroys the costume, and the luck loop comes to an end. It's that time again, school election time, for the role of class president. Now, who are the two main candidates? Well, the candidates are Stephanie, who usually wins, and Becky, who wants to actually make the school a better place. But unfortunately, her campaign isn't going the greatest, because Stephanie has a lot more public speaking ability than Becky does, and she's just a lot more popular from the offset. So, Becky offers to be an art model in an art class, and Templeton makes a beauty known as Bocky. But it may have looked like Becky was about to win the election, but not for long, because Stephanie sabotages all of her artwork, graffitiing all of it. But then, the shoe they put on the generator to disable the security cameras gets taken off by Murdoch. This causes an overcharge in the generator, which shocks Bocky, and then she comes to life. Becky and Bocky then become great friends, the best of friends. But Becky, unfortunately, offends Bocky and was really rude to her, so then Bocky decides to work for Stephanie. Stephanie wins the election. Now I might be thinking, oh, okay, you know what? Fair enough. But it turns out that Templeton is found to be mind-controlling everyone with his potato-powered mind control helmet because he is just so in love with Bocky. But then a rubbish monster attacks, killing Bocky, who sacrifices herself for the greater good of society. Godspeed, Bocky. Godspeed. Alright then, with episode 12 out of the way, it's time for the final episode. Episode 13. So, the main premise of this episode is that all of the technology in the school is barely functioning, milk shoots out of every direction, and Nimrod is just completely busted, absolutely busted. So, Mitchell gets annoyed because he mismarked his test, and tries to confuse BMO, and he confuses BMO so much that he just straight up explodes. And then the new robot teacher, oh, everyone likes her a lot, but a few cracks start to show with the new state-of-the-art language lab. For you see, whenever a child makes even a slight infraction on the rules, they are sent to the language lab, where their brain is reprogrammed and they follow the system. Jesus Christ, this bot must have been sent by the CCP or something. So anyway, long story short, almost everyone in the school gets mind-controlled. Everyone except Mitchell, Templeton, and Becky. So, how do they prevent this technological takeover? Well, what they do is, they reprogram BMO. They plug him back in, get him a massive extension cord so that he can move around, and then BMO, he takes control of all of the other machines in the area, and then they go and fight the modern machines in the canteen, and then they win. Thank fuck, we're finally done. We're finally free. Thank you all so much for watching me rant about a really old TV show that chances are none of you will ever have seen. I would recommend, though, I've already spoiled most of season 1 and still would recommend that you watch the full episodes because they're genuinely really good. Also, I was considering covering the second season, but I decided that I want you guys to have something to watch spoiler-free. So I'd recommend you look up Forgotten Gold's channel and you just watch Season 2 of Strange Hill High. Trust me, it's a good watch. You won't regret it. And thank you very much for watching. Yeah, again, as mentioned prior, my Skylanders video should be coming out soon. Unfortunately, the gameplay footage kind of came out a bit wonky, so I might need to play through the game again and re-record the footage. But, regardless, I just want to say, thanks.